Chad, we'll start with you and some of the signings that you've liked. Some of the stuff that you've seen so far in free agency in the NHL that you've liked so far.
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, you guys know me, huge Leaf fan, so I love the Joe Thornton signing. I think there's no downside with that signing. I like the Wayne Simmons signing. I would have liked it to be a little bit of a smaller number, but 1.5, that's definitely manageable, even if he plays on the fourth line. So both of those signings are fantastic for me. Obviously, TJ Brody, I was ecstatic about that. And the big one, and you might not think this is the big one at home, but Ilya Mikheyev. I think that is a really important signing for the Maple Leafs, especially at the dollar value that they got him for. I think going into arbitration, which that didn't happen, and he ended up signing on the day of his hearing, or it might have been the day before. So it didn't get to arbitration, which is great because even though I think the Leafs might get a better number in arbitration, I mean, you don't have to go through a court process and just ruin the player from the team's aspect. But so that was good. They got him for, I believe it's 1.64 million for 2 years. And I think that's really important because if all goes well, Ilya Mikheyev will be playing in the top six for the Leafs. And that's awesome for that price. I think he's a Zach Hyman comparable. And he might even be able to replace Zach Hyman if he becomes too expensive at the end of that deal. One signing also that surprised me, not the Leafs, was Torrey Krug to St. Louis. I thought that was like, to me, that was just kind of weird. I always pictured Krug as a Boston Bruin, just one of those guys who would maybe take less to win, like so many other Boston Bruin players. I mean, obviously, I don't know the player personally, but that one kind of just shocked me. But other than that, it's been a pretty crazy offseason so far, and we don't even know how much longer we have because obviously we don't know when the season is going to start. But yeah, I'll send it to you. Any moves that like sort of surprised you, or those are my thoughts there?
Well, just quickly, I want to touch on two of yours.
Yeah, sure.
First off, Mikheyev.
How is it? I go Mikheyev.
Mikheyev?
Yeah, Mikheyev, yeah.
That was the signing I was most concerned about for the Leafs going into free agency, and they got him at an absolute steal. One of those prove yourself contracts, but frankly, I think it's going to be the last 2 years of his Leaf career type thing.
I think so too.
I think he's going to play fantastic, and he's going to get a payday in 2 years, and it's not going to be by the Leafs because they won't be able to afford it by then. Secondly, I want to talk about Torrey Krug. My prediction, hot take on Torrey Krug, is that he's going to be the next Tyson Barrie. I think that he's a very similar player, had very similar careers so far, one in Boston and one in Colorado, and then they get moved or take off. And I think he's just not going to be the same playing in St. Louis. It's kind of like a systems thing for me. I just don't see him fitting in there, and I don't know if he's going to have the same success as he did in Boston, frankly.
Well, he is getting paid a lot of money in St. Louis, and with that cap hit comes some pretty high expectations, similar to Tyson Barrie, who knew he was going to get a payday and also had some expectations that he, quite frankly, didn't live up to in Toronto. So that's a pretty good comparison.
Yeah, and it's pretty weird that they're willing to spend that money on Torrey Krug, but they let Pietrangelo walk. It's like it's a little confusing to me. Lose your captain and everything, but that's the business, I guess. And I think they're a worse team now because of it. And Vegas is heck of a lot better. That top pairing, Shea Theodore and Pietrangelo, that's gonna be nasty. But like, man, that team is just cutting off ties left, right, and center. Like there's no faith in their players anymore. Some more stuff I want to talk about with the free agency that just passed before we get into the history here is I'm going to remember this year as the year of the goalie for sure when it comes to free agency. Just all sorts of big fish goalies going everywhere. And you love to see it, but I always get scared when they dish out contracts to goalies. And that's the second thing I want to talk about is contracts, because this has been a funny year so far, with a little bit of an uncertainty with the next season, as well as the flat cap and everything going on. Here's a little stat from Cap Friendly. The opening day of free agency in 2020 featured 80 contracts totaling $302 million in contract value.
Holy.
That's tiny.
Whoa.
Opening day in 2019 had 126 contracts and $708 million worth of value.
Whoa.
Just crazy. And then the other part of this is there is very few long-term deals.
Yeah.
Very few. I think there's been 2 or 3 for $7 million.
7 years.
Like 7 years, sorry. And like around 8, 5, 6, and then just a ton of 1, 2, and 3 year contracts. A lot of prove me contracts. Yeah. And some weird ones that I'm sure Harp's going to touch on, like a Taylor Hall 1 year. But there's a lot of 1 year contracts out there, and some pretty good signings. And I think the biggest steal and maybe the best fit for me is Evgeny Dadonov to the Ottawa Senators. I think that's kind of a steal. That guy, he had in the last 3 years, he had 1 less goal than Sasha Barkov on that team. Yep. I think it was like 81 or 82 goals, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's
now different players, but I get the point.
Yeah. I'm pointing out, like, he was a key contributor in Florida. They got him pretty cheap in Ottawa, and I think he's going to be a good little part of their future there. It'll be interesting.
Harp, just before you jump in, because I know you're eager, I want to say one thing that I heard on the Leafs Lunch show with Andy Petrillo, and it was actually Mike Johnson who said this, just going back to Casey talking about like the shorter term deals. So we know that the NHL probably won't start until the new year, just because it doesn't make sense for training camps to start, say late December or like even mid-December, and then you take that break and then come back after Christmas. Like, it's kind of just weird. So like it'll probably start in early January, but the problem is they have to finish the season because, you don't want it going too far because you want to be able to start the next season. This next season coming up is going to be a shortened one. And I don't know this for certain, but mark my words, it will be a shorter one. I think that's the general consensus around insiders around the league. Mike Johnson said the short-term deal aspect of this has a lot to do with escrow, because in this shortened season, predicting or projecting it to be anywhere between like 40 and 60 games, you're getting paid, or you're having escrow taken out of your account at the same fixed rate as normal, defined by the CBA. But if you're playing less games, you're earning less of your salary on a percentage basis. So that means the players want to play more games, but I just can't see it happening. So say you're making $1 million, okay, and you only play 50% of the games. You play a 41 game season. You're making $500K. Then you take escrow off of that, and you're coming out of a deal with like $300K after taxes. So a lot of these players are like, listen, normally you would front load this contract, like we've seen with tons of players, especially like players I can think of are like John Tavares, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, because Leafs, that comes to mind first. But you would normally front load these contracts, but a lot of guys aren't because of that. And so, Case, like, really important point that you made there, that a lot of these are coming up.
What I saw in this ESPN article that I read, and it's actually where they had that cap friendly quote, is they broke down Torrey Krug's contract, kind of showing this. They didn't explain why, like you just did, which was excellent. But the contract is $4 million, $4 million, $8 million, 8.5, 8.5, and then it goes down a little bit. But then they also showed Kevin LeBanc, or LeBlanc, whatever. It's 3.2, 3.8, and then 5.8. And so it's not even just the long contracts, it's the short ones as well that are doing that. So yeah, it's a weird season for contracts and free agency, for sure.
Flat capped, shortened upcoming season, like all of this goes into contracts, and that's why it's been a little crazy. Did that make sense? How I was explaining that?
It made sense to me.
Absolutely. Mike Kelly did it so much better. Mike Kelly, the stats guy, he's the best. So anyway.
Yeah. And Chad, Elliot Friedman has talked about that as well with the escrow, and that, at the beginning, the players were, under the understanding that even if they played one game in the new season, just one, that they would earn their full salary 100%. So
yeah, well, I think that's what they're trying to negotiate, but I don't think that's set in stone. And I could be wrong, but I think that's what Mike Kelly was trying to explain.
Mm-hmm. No,
Anyways.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and it's a great point by you, Case. Again, a lot of short-term, low-risk deals, and the players are obviously accepting of these during times like these. And looking at surprises, obviously, I'm going to mention the Buffalo Sabres right off the top. Who knew that Taylor Hall will be coming to Buffalo on a one-year deal at $8 million? And it's just, we've seen teams kind of change their plan, or at least change what we've heard about them. Like going into this offseason free agency, there was a lot of talk in Buffalo in particular, in a market like that they would have an internal cap of, $71-72 million. But then, Taylor Hall on a one-year deal for $8 million, that quickly closes that gap financially in your salary cap. And again, just going back to the Ottawa Senators, I mean, what an off season for them of getting Dadonov. That's a 3-year deal at $5 million per, and very low risk. And at the beginning, you were like, what's going on? Anthony Duclair didn't get qualified, and he represented himself, and they couldn't make a deal work. But then you signed Dadonov, and that's, okay. And then they're probably going to work out something for Connor Brown. So yeah, very interesting offseason, a lot of short-term deals, some buyouts too. Kyle Turris, that was a big one in Nashville. Henrik Lundqvist, obviously with the Rangers, going to the Capitals on a one-year deal, and Turris went to the Edmonton Oilers on a 2-year deal. So it's been very interesting, very entertaining.
Yeah, Connor Brown will be an interesting one to look at, because his arbitration filing is completely different than what Ottawa wants for him. I think he wanted 4.8, and Ottawa wants to give him 2.25. So that'll be an interesting one. He plays most minutes as a forward on that team. I believe he led the team in points. Also, it might have been Shabbat, because that kid's crazy. But I mean, at least among forwards, like he is a very valuable player to that team.
You'd have to think it's a play by Connor Brown.
For sure.
You always ask for way more than you want. He probably wants like $3.5 million, if that was my guess. And I think that's what he'll get. Yeah. Also, he has in favor that everyone on this planet knows that the Ottawa Senators are cheap. So, that might be in effect when the arbitrator is looking into this. I don't know how that works, really. I'm not a lawyer, but I think he'll get a high $3 million contract, deserves it, and see if he can continue the play from last year, because it was a little bit of a freak phenomenon.
Yeah, man, because I think he had like high 40s in points or whatever. But before we get into the top 3 worst free agent signings in the cap era, or I guess just in the recent era, I had a question for you guys. And it relates back to what Harp was talking about with the signing of Taylor Hall in Buffalo. How many freaking points is Taylor Hall going to get playing next to Jack Eichel this season? If it were an 82 game season, how many points would he get?
85.
Oh, 85? You think so?
I don't know. I don't even want to talk about Taylor Hall. I mean, we will, obviously, because you have to. I think it's just baffling, his choice. Like, I don't know where his loyalties are at all, or not his loyalties, but his mindset. Like, I want to win a cup. I want to win a cup. I want to win. I want to go to a team that wins. $8 million though, 1 year, to a team that's hopefully going to be 1 for 10 making the playoffs in the last decade. So that was a little confusing. No offense, Harp. I think obviously he'll get more than 85 points. And I like what Frank from Hockey Illuminati on Instagram, good follow. He was saying, he might be just playing alongside Jack Eichel so that he can get the biggest ticket we've seen in NHL history with Seattle.
Yes.
I thought that was a good opinion.
Wow, that is something that I have not heard, but you know what? It's a good point. Like, I was
Sorry, Hart. He's going to play 23 minutes, like a game or something like that. You'd have to think that. Eichel and Hall and Olofsson are not going to leave the ice. Sorry, go ahead, Hart.
No, and you know what? You can't forget about that second line either. Eric Stahl, Jeff Skinner, and Sam Reinhart. So the Sabres do have a nice top six now. And guys, the only thing I'm going to say is, regardless of what I heard, is Ralph Kruger, the head coach, who has a history with Taylor Hall from their days in Edmonton together, has a huge role in this. And I think if the Sabres can get off to a really hot start and squeak into the playoffs, that because of the relationship there and the fact that Hall gets to play with Jack on the first line, I could see a long-term fit for Taylor Hall in Buffalo, and that's the only thing I'll say.
I think the opposite, that he's not going to be in Buffalo long-term. I think he's going to get 115 points. Eichel's going to get 130, and he's going to win the Hart, and then Taylor Hall is going to sign for like $12 million in Seattle.
That's what I think. I'm kind of around there too.